واتل ما أوحي إليك من كتاب ربك لا مبدل لكلماته ولن تجد من دونه ملتحدا.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the tafsir of Surah Al-Kahf. And before we start inshallah, the class inshallah will be for half an hour. So whoever wants to leave early, no harm inshallah because of the shuruq time. But we'll finish inshallah at 7 inshallah ta'ala. Yesterday we covered ayah number 28 and some of the benefits mentioned there. And I said that we'll talk a little bit about the sabab al-nuzul, or the reason why the verse was revealed, and looking, and this was the homework, to look into these awamir, to these commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these previous verses, to benefit from it and to act upon it, inshallah ta'ala, since the commands to the Prophet ﷺ are commands to his ummah, unless something is specifically mentioned that this is exclusive to the Prophet ﷺ, which is not the case in these verses. So before we go through verses 29, in verse number 28, واصبر نفسك مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه ولا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا ولا تطع من أغفلنا قلبه عن ذكرنا واتبع هواه وكان أمره فرطا. And we read the tafsir of it, so without going through the reviewing everything, but briefly this ayah, as Ibn Kathir rahimahullah he mentioned, and others, was revealed, as he said, نزلت في أشراف قريش, for the chiefs and the leaders of Quraysh, when they asked the Prophet ﷺ that he sits with them alone, ولا يجالسهم بضعفاء أصحابه, and not to allow the weak of his companions like Bilal and Ammar and Suhaib and Khabbab and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and the like of them. And they wanted to sit with the Prophet ﷺ alone. وَلْيُفْرِدْ أُولَٰئِكَ بِمَجْلِسٍ عَلَى حِدَةٍ, and to sit with the rest on a separate majlis. And of course they asked this because of their arrogance, because of them seeing themselves that they are of a higher level than those who used to be slaves or servants or whatever, or not from the tribe of Quraysh. So the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade them of this, even though, and this was mentioned in Surah Al-An'am, in the ayah number 52 in Surah Al-An'am, and we went through this, وَلَا تَطْرُدِ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُم بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ. Do not expel those who invoke the Lord in the morning and in the evening. And even though there was a great benefit, a potential benefit in the da'wah, in calling these chiefs of Quraysh, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala softened the hearts to the deen, then many people would follow them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade the Prophet ﷺ from this, to make the matter clear. Guidance is in the hands of Allah. And for someone to, even as it shows the importance of the believers, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loved the believers, so to even break the heart of any of the believers, this is something that is great to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the Prophet ﷺ thought of this, not to undermine the companions, but for the benefit of the da'wah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayah in Surah Al-An'am and this verse, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ. So the Prophet ﷺ was commanded to make himself patient with those who are making dua and dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in the morning and in the evening. And the Prophet ﷺ would go afterwards to the people of Ahl al-Suffah, the poor people, at the end of the masjid of the Prophet, at the back of the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and he would say, I've been commanded to sit with you. And also, وَلَا تَعْدُ عَيْنَاكَ عَنْهُمْ تُرِيدُ زِينَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Do not extend your eyes away from them. Seek in the dunya. That means that you seek instead of them the people of wealth and status and so on. And this is one of the trials or the tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the human beings go through in this life. That da'watul haqq, the da'wah of the truth, the first ones that accepts it it's been the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the weak and the oppressed. And that's why the foolish ones, or those who follow the materialistic things of this life, they might not be then see the truth, because they think that the truth is with the powerful ones, with those who have wealth, with those who have status, with those who have power. And it's not to praise oppression or to praise weakness, no, but this is how things are. And then the da'wah spreads by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to make firm the matter, and the surah was a Makki surah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam to be firm upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And before that we saw وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ, and the importance of adhering to the wahy, to the revelation from Allah. وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ, and the significance of نَفْسَك, as mentioned before. وَلَا تَعْدُ عَيْنَاكَ عَنْهُمْ, this is nahi. وَلَا تُطِعْ مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا, do not obey the one that we made their hearts in ghafla, in forgetfulness from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ وَكَانَ أَمْرُهُ فُرُطًا, and they followed their desires, and their affairs were furuta, was loose. And all of these characteristics, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His mercy, He gives the believers the means for them to follow, and to be warned against those who show these types of characteristics, to be away from obeying them, from following them in their advices and their things of that nature, because they can lead them astray. And the benefits that we read yesterday, it's really required for each and every one of us to go through them, as he mentioned, وَدَلَّتِ الْآيَةِ وَفِي الْآيَةِ كَذَا, like these things that we read. Then after that, ayah number 29. Ayah number 29, as we see here, it's the set of ayat. We're not going to go through all of them, inshallah, but we have here in the bottom of page 930, وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ إِنَّا أَعْتَدْنَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ نَارًا أَحَاطَ بِهِمْ سُرَادِقُهَا وَإِنْ يَسْتَغِيثُوا يُغَاثُوا بِمَاءٍ كَالْمُهْلِ يَشْوِي الْوُجُوهِ بِئْسَ الشَّرَابُ وَسَاءَتْ مُرْتَفَقًا إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ إِنَّا لَا نُضِيعُ أَجْرَ مَنْ أَحْسَنَ عَمَلًا أولئك لهم جنات عدن تجري من تحتهم الأنهار يحلون فيها من أساور من ذهب ولؤلؤا من ذهب ويلبسون ثيابا خضرا من سندس واستبرق متكئين فيها على الأرائك نعم الثواب وحسنت مرتفقا. The translation: and say the truth is from your Lord. So whoever wills, let him believe, and whoever wills, let him disbelieve. Indeed, we have prepared for the wrongdoers a fire whose walls will surround them. And if they call for relief, they will be relieved with water like murky oil, which scalds their faces. Wretched is the drink, and evil is the resting place. Indeed, those who have believed and done righteous deeds, indeed, we would not allow to be lost the reward of any who did well in deeds. Those will have gardens of perpetual residence. Beneath them, rivers will flow. They will be adorned therein with bracelets of gold, and will wear green garments of fine silk and brocade, reclining therein on adorned couches. Excellent is the reward, and good is the resting place. I'm just reading the translation, but we're not going by necessarily what's in the translation. We're just going by what's in the tafsir, inshallah ta'ala. We might just go through the tafsir of ayah number 29 because of the time, but both are mentioned because this is how things are with the Quran being kitabun mathani. When the disbelievers are mentioned, the believers are mentioned. When the punishment is mentioned, the rewards is mentioned, so that the person have both in the heart at the same time, not just to be left with one thing and not the other. So he says here, Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, in ayah number 29, أي, meaning which means وقل الحق من ربكم أي قل للناس يا محمد. That means say to the people, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, هو, this is الحق من ربكم, this is the truth from your Lord. أي, meaning قد تبين الهدى من الضلال. Guidance has been made clear, تبين, from البيان, من الضلال, from deviation, والرشد من الغي, rushd, uprightness, the correct ways, from al-ghayy, from being taken away from the proper ghaya and objective and means. He says, وصفات أهل السعادة وصفات أهل الشقاوة. These matters have been made very clear. The characteristics of the people of happiness versus the characteristics of the people, those who are wretched and ruined. Believers versus the disbelievers. And their sifat, their characteristics are very clear in the Quran, in this life and in the hereafter. Very clear, no ambiguity in it. وذلك بما بينه الله على لسان رسوله. This is by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it clear. So it's from the wahy, from Allah, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام على لسان رسوله, on the speech of his messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم. فإذا بان واتضح. Ban from تبين. This is the past tense. فإذا بان, that means since it became very clear. واتضح, and الوضوح also, clarity. ولم يبقى فيه شبهة, and there's no shubha, no doubt in it whatsoever. And the shubha here is which is which, who's believers, who's disbelievers. If a person reads the Quran, would he have any shubha or any doubt what's the characteristics of the believers versus the characteristics of the disbelievers? No doubt whatsoever. Clear instructions of how to fulfill the ubudiyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every single detail. So this is al-haqq, this is the truth from your Lord. So qul, meaning to the people. And part of that is al-haqqu min rabbikum, I came to you with the haqq from your Lord. I'm the final messenger of Allah, and I came to you with the haqq, with the truth from your Lord. So he says, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. So therefore whoever will, let him believe, and whoever will, let him disbelieve. Because the Prophet ﷺ was not sent to force people. He was sent to present the truth to them. Whoever believes it, this is good for them. Whoever disbelieves, then it's upon them. And the warnings are there. And the warnings are in the hereafter. So if they disbelieve in the hereafter, why do they care? They should care less if they disbelieve in the hereafter, right? And this is one of the things that is so strange from the disbelief. You know, if the disbelievers, they disbelieve in the hereafter. And the Prophet ﷺ told them that if you disbelieve, you will be burned in the hellfire forever in the hereafter. They should care less because they disbelieve in the hereafter. But they would show their enmity to the Prophet ﷺ, and therefore the punishment is in the hereafter, and that's why it's the choice. And لا إكراه في الدين, there's no compulsion in the religion. فمن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر. Also it shows the mashia. Human beings, they have a will, and whoever denies this, he's insane. He does not have any way of thinking whatsoever. So he says here, أي لم يبقى, and also in it, in itself, is warning. فمن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر. The matter has been made very clear. So whoever will wish, let him believe. Whoever will, let him disbelieve. أي لم يبقى إلا سلوك أحد الطريقين بحسب توفيق العبد وعدم توفيقه. That means it's only, there's nothing left. لم يبقى, except to take suluk from al-maslak, from the path, to take one of the two paths, either the path of the al-iman or the path of kufr or disbelief. بحسب توفيق العبد, according to the tawfiq, the help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the abd, وعدم توفيقه, and the one that are not helped. وقد أعطاه الله مشيئة, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the human being mashia, will. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave something to the human beings, that means they are responsible for acting upon it or not. And why? Because لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not ordain upon the people something that is beyond their capacity. So that's why if someone is majnoon, insane, and you command that insane person, you have to make a decision, you're putting something beyond his capacity. He's not responsible for his actions. Or a child, right, that did not reach the age of puberty, and so on. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the human beings the will, that a person has the ability to choose between two choices. And the matter is very clear. And this is very obvious to anyone that have sanity. وَقَدْ أَعْطَاهُ اللَّهُ مَشِيئَةً بِهَا يَقْدِرُ. By this mashia, by this will that Allah gave the human being, he has the power, the ability, على الإيمان والكفر, to be upon al-iman or to be upon the kufr. وَالْخَيْرِ وَالشَّرِّ, and the good and the evil. This is the ability to do both. Because some people, they think that when someone is upon belief and righteousness and away from sins, or he doesn't have the desire for it. Who said that? Everybody has the desire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in the human beings what is in each and every one of them. But someone worked on themselves and stayed away from it, and someone follows his desires and commits what is evil. Right? And that's why those who might claim or they think that someone that is righteous and believer does not have the desire what human beings they have, this is wrong. But this is the will here, the decision to be made. And people understand this concept very well in their worldly matters. You know, if someone is having the will whether to study or don't study, whether to go to work or you don't go to work. If you go to work, then there's consequences. If you don't go to work, there's consequences. This is how human beings understand that very well. So they have the ability, the human beings, they have the ability to be upon al-iman and to be upon the kufr, to be upon what is good, to be upon what is evil. فَمَنْ آمَنْ, so whoever believes, فَقَدْ وُفِّقَ لِلصَّوَابِ, he has been guided to the right way. And al-isaba, al-sawab, is when you hit the target. So he is done great. وَمَنْ كَفَرَ, and whoever disbelieves, فَقَدْ قَامَتْ عَلَيْهِ الْحُجَّةِ, the hujjah has been established upon him. The evidence has been established. That means he has no excuse. He's been invited, the matter has been made clear, and the punishment has been made clear in the hereafter. So then if he comes in the day of judgment and he's punished, who is the one to be blamed? Himself. And again, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا, with the condition that the message had reached him. وَلَيْسَ بِمُكْرَهٍ عَلَى الْإِيمَانِ, whoever kafar, whoever disbelieved, he's not compulsed, he's not forced to be upon al-iman. And he's not forced to be upon al-iman, and it's not even ever to be perceived that someone would be forced to be a believer. Because the foundation of that is in the heart. And nobody knows what's in the heart of anyone. So if someone pretend to be, that doesn't mean anything. If someone says, "Ana mu'min" a million times, it does not make him a believer. He might be lying. So there's no one can force anyone when it comes to matters of al-iman or al-kufr, because this is originated from the heart. But they can force them physically to do things. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he said, إِلَى مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ, except the one that is forced to say even the word of kufr, but their heart are very content and tranquil with al-iman. There's no harm for them. So as he said, subhanahu wa ta'ala, كما قال تعالى, لا إكراه في الدين, no compulsion in the religion. قد تبين الرشد من الغي, because الرشد, the uprightness, the correct way, has been made clear from al-ghay, from deviation. And this ayah came after what? After the best ayah of the Quran, Ayatul Kursi. And the wuduh and the bayan and the clarity in Ayatul Kursi is nothing beyond that. No like of it on the face of earth. If all human beings get together to try to talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the most perfect way, they can never come up with something like Ayatul Kursi. So Ayatul Kursi is mentioned. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. If then after that, la ikrah fi din, because the matter has been made very clear. Whoever will to believe, this is good for them. Whoever will to disbelieve, then no compulsion in the religion, and they have been warned. He says, يقول وليس في قوله فمن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر. He's saying that to protect oneself from the misunderstanding. It doesn't mean that whoever will, let him believe, and whoever will, let him disbelieve. Al-idhn fi kila al-amrayn, the permission, that means both are approved and both are good, and iman and kufr are beautiful and nothing wrong with both of them. No. وإنما ذلك تهديد ووعيد. This is rather تهديد, threat, and وعيد, warnings. لمن اختار الكفر بعد البيان التام. For those who choose al-kufr, disbelief, after the matter has been made very clear to them. كما ليس فيها تركه قتال الكافرين. And in it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not order the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام not to fight the disbelievers. The Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام fought them. ثم ذكر تعالى مآل الفريقين. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after that mentioned مآل, the end, the outcome of the two groups, the believers and the disbelievers. فقال, for the disbelievers, إِنَّ أَعْتَدْنَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ, we prepared for the ظالمين, الظالمين, the wrongdoers, the unjust ones, by what? بِالْكُفْرِ وَالْفُسُوقِ وَالْعِصْيَانِ, by the kufr and rebellious major sins. نارا أحاط بهم سرادقها. We prepared for them نارا, fire, and it's nakira to show that it's such a great thing. أحاط بهم سرادقها. أحاط بهم, encompassed them from all directions. سرادقها, meaning the fence of it. That means they cannot leave it. They're surrounded from all directions. أي سورها المحيط بها. السرادق is the fence, is the wall surrounding them. فليس لهم منفذ ولا طريق. There's no منفذ. المنفذ is passage, whether it's small or big. ولا طريق, no road, no path. ولا مخلص منها, and there's nothing, no way out of it. تصلاهم النار الحامية. النار الحامية. الحامية is the very heated fire would burn them. وإن يستغيثوا, and if they make استغاثة, seeking help, أي يطلبوا الشراب. الاستغاثة is when someone is in dire need, matter of life and death. So whenever the people of the hellfire, not just asking for a cup of water or something like this because they're lazy, they're making استغاثة because they're burned in the hellfire. أي يطلبوا الشراب, seeking drink, ليطفئ ما نزل به من العطش الشديد, to extinguish what's in them of the extreme thirst. يغاثوا بماء كالمهل, and you see how they're, as it's mentioned in many verses in the Quran, in some verses they ask to leave the hellfire. And of course, this is not granted for them. They ask for them to be destroyed and to be, finished. And that also is not granted for them. So they ask for anything. They ask for water, from the people of Jannah, for example. They ask for the punishment to be relieved, to be, decreased a little bit, anything. And none of that will be given to them because it's too late for them. So that's here. وَإِن يَسْتَغِيثُوا يُغَاثُوا, they will be responded from الاستغاثة. يُغَاثُوا, they will be given the help, but with what? بِمَاءٍ كَالْمُهْلِ يَشْوِي الْوُجُوهِ, with water كالمهل. المهل is كالرصاص المذاب, is like the lead that is melted. أو كعكر الزيت, this is the bottom of the oil. من شدة حرارته, because of how intense heat it is. بماء كالمهل, this is both meaning can apply to the muhl. And the like of this is mentioned throughout the Quran. يشوي الوجوه, it roasts their faces. أي فكيف بالأمعاء والبطون, if the faces when it's burned becomes how it looks. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. So he says فكيف بالأمعاء والبطون, if this is the face, how is it then for the أمعاء, the inside, the guts of the person and the bellies. كما قال تعالى, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يصهر به ما في بطونهم والجلود. يصهر, الصهر is when something is melted from how the intense heat is. ولهم مقامع من حديد, they have مقامع, things that hit them from iron. So this is another verse. يشوي الوجوه بئس الشراب وساءت مرتفقة. بئس الشراب, what a worst drink that is. بئس اسلوب ذم, the worst thing that they can receive. الذي يراد ليطفئ العطش, they want something to drink to push away. الإطفاء is when you put off a fire, and العطش or the extreme thirst is like you have fire inside, so you want water to put off this fire of thirst. So they asked for something to drink that's supposed to put off this fire of thirst, but instead they get this sharab كالمهل يشوي الوجوه. Before even it comes into their mouth, their faces becomes burned from the sharab, from the drink that they asked for, because of how intensity of the heat of it. When it comes closer to their face melts, their face burned. So you can imagine then what happened to their inside if they drink it, if that's from a distance to their face. So he says ليس بئس الشراب الذي يراد ليطفئ العطش ويدفع بعض العذاب, that's supposed to push away some of the punishment. فيكون زيادة في عذابهم, so that same sharab becomes more an increase in their punishment. وشدة عقابهم في عذابهم وشدة عقابهم, and the intensity of their punishment. So they made istighatha, the ighatha came with worse. So they would wish they never asked for any help. وساءت مرتفقة, and what also an evil place is the fire. مرتفقة is from الرفق, something that you're supposed to have gentle meanings in it, help in it. So وساءت meaning the fire مرتفقة. يقول هذا ذم لحالة النار. This is condemning, showing the state of the fire. أنها ساءت المحل, the worst place. الذي يرتفق به, the one that's supposed to be, when someone finds a place to sit, he wants a comfortable place, something that is gentle for him. So this is the worst place for a person, one's abode. And as they say, even from a worldly perspective, when you find a place that you like, that you're safe in, that you're comfortable in, this is one of the delight of this life. And once a person reaches that state, that means he's good, even though this dunya never stops. But when you have a place and you like your place and you're content with it, so imagine an everlasting life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from now fire. So he says, فَإِنَّهَا لَيْسَ فِيهَا ارْتِفَاقٍ. There's no irtifaq in it. There's no goodness in it. There's no comfort in the hellfire. وَإِنَّمَا فِيهَا الْعَذَابُ الْعَظِيمُ. Rather in it is العذاب العظيم, the great punishment, الشاق, the difficult one, الذي لا يفتر عنهم ساعة. As it's mentioned in the Quran, there's no futur, does not quit or does not stop for 1 hour. There's no stopping whatsoever, no breaks, no food, no drink. And there's food and drink, but it's also part of the fire. وهم فيه مبلسون. That means they are in state of disparity. There's no hope for them. قد أيسوا من كل خير. They gave up from every good. ونسيهم الرحيم في العذاب كما نسوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala neglected, left them in the punishment as they forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا تُطِعْ مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ. When they were in forgetfulness from the remembrance of Allah, they are treated like that in the hellfire. And they keep on screaming and asking and calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say to them, after Allah knows best how long, اخسأوا فيها ولا تكلمون. Stay in it, humiliated, do not speak to me. And إنه كان فريق من عبادي, reminding them, make even more punishment for them, reminding them of how they used to act in this life. The believers came to them, invited you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you disbelieved, you punished them, you tortured them, you killed them. So there's no way for them if they died in that state of disbelief. So this is what the end of what he mentioned here. The wajib upon these types of things, of course, is to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not to think of necessarily others and that's it, but to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most just. Unlike those who would read these ayat and question, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-adl. And the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond what anyone would comprehend whatsoever. And al-khalqa khalqu. The creation is the creation of Allah. So no one will have mercy upon his creation more than him subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one that created us. And he subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-alim, al-hakim, al-rahim, al-adl subhanahu wa ta'ala. So no one is to question the justice of Allah, the wisdom of Allah, the mercy of Allah, because the abd doesn't have this ability and he shouldn't. You're abd to Allah. And this issue of even allowing for someone to forget that he is a abd to Allah, look at yourself 100 years from now, you were nothing. And all of a sudden you want to dispute with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a human being. You were nothing whatsoever. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you from what you know, the stages of how the human beings are created. And then once He's given, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him the ability to think in his limitations, then he think he can have a dispute with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, khaliq as-samawati wal ard. This is ignorance, and that's why it's really, the way of the Quran in these matters, it is not a debatable issue. First of all, before you debate, you have to make sure that the grounds are clear. Otherwise, the debate, or you're talking to someone about something that doesn't make sense. Who are you versus who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So to humble oneself and to focus more on what the abd should do. And the abd should go back to وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ. The abd, he received the messages from his Lord, al-wahy from Allah. The wahy says, do this, he follows that, he submits himself, he humble himself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worship Allah with the fear of Allah, because He's the most just subhanahu wa ta'ala, and with the mercy of Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. as it's going to be mentioned in the next verses that we read the translation of it. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات إن لا نضيع أجر من أحسن عمل. So none of their deeds will be wasted or ruined, and for them is جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار, جنات gardens that runs from underneath it, rivers يحلون فيها, the opposite, يحلون, they are adorned in it with أساور من ذهب, with bracelets of gold, ويلبسون ثيابا خضرا من سندس واستبرق متكئين فيها على الأرائك نعم الثواب. As before بئس الشراب, here نعم الثواب. وحسنت مرتفقة, حسنت مرتفقة, المرتفق again. So المرتفق, even the word when someone, it's a word also used for what you sleep on. You know, when you're traveling or when you're in the haram, for example, you want to sleep. You wish the pillow is such a valuable thing if you can have a pillow to rest your neck or your head on. This is murtafaq, and you find yourself a comfortable place that would give you comfort. So either it's going to be ساءت مرتفقة or حسنت مرتفقة, and of course it doesn't mean the place to sit or to sleep, but it's the abode is the place or the final destination. وأن إلى ربك المنتهى, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the end of things. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit and to protect us from the hellfire and to make us among the people of Jannah. The attendance code is الحق من ربكم. The attendance code is الحق من ربكم. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.